Well, welcome to the first lecture in the book here, and hopefully these lectures will help you understand some of the content. So this is Chapter 1, Understanding Ancient America Before 1940 or 1492. Excuse me. And I just always like to start out with four aspects of history, which hopefully make some sense when you think about it. But basically, in every time period, there's political history, which is pretty much the government's role in history and how much that government does, and what the kind of policies the government pursues. There's also an economic part to history, which is basically what are people doing in terms of money, jobs, economic systems. And when you study about everything in this course, you look at the history of the colonists, for example, and what kind of economic systems they set up. So I always try to do that to help you understand culturally and socially. Hopefully those two things are very much interrelated. Culturally, cultural values are very important when we talk about the history of early America. For example, when the Puritans come and they set up their religious system, they have a certain culture. The southern colonies have a certain culture. The middle colonies have a certain culture. So hopefully that will make sense a little bit later on in the course. And then social here, when you talk about that, what does the society of America look like? Who's on top? Who's on bottom? What's the class structure? Do we have rich people, poor people? Do we have free people? Do we have slaves? So in every lecture, I always try to hit everything, and hopefully it'll help you understand all of this stuff. I call it PECs for short. Maybe someday I could make some money off it, but okay. And sometimes geography can make a big difference in history too, and I think that's one of the big things about early American history is that where the settlers settled and their relationship with the land kind of impacts the type of colonies they set up. So here we go. Learning objectives tonight or today or whenever you're doing this. The first one is to learn the characteristics of Native American civilizations before contact with Europeans. And the second one is hopefully you'll understand the stereotypes of Native Americans associated with Europeans at the time of contact, because there's plenty of that. And so let's get into Native American civilizations a little bit, and hopefully understanding patterns of contact. How did Native Americans affect Europeans, and how did Europeans affect Native Americans? And so I'm really big on that for the first two chapters. Who were the first Americans? Well, we know that the first humans entered North America 40,000 years ago across a land bridge. As you may or may not know, we're talking about the Bering Strait between Alaska and what is now Russia. And that's what most archaeologists, most people that study this stuff believe happened 40,000 years ago. We can trace most of the migration into the heart of America roughly between 20,000 to 10,000 BC. Now, if you notice, this is such a wide range because we just have no idea, frankly, exactly the years. But we do know that humans were here, and we do know that humans generally were here, at least in North America, in our part of the world, here in Fresno, about that point. And so here's a nice little map here. There's no humans yet here, but anyways, as time goes on in the present day, when you look at where Native Americans came, it's right here, when basically Asia, the map was to go a little bit further. It's connected here to North America via a land bridge. So they came down here, and then they eventually settled down here. Now what we'll find out is there's plenty more Native American tribes and peoples down here than there is up in North America. Milestones of the first Americans. We know that about 10,000 to 5,000 years ago, we know that farming developed in Mexico, allowing civilization to spread, and that's very important because domesticating various crops such as corn, which is what the Mexican Empire did very well, is key to sustaining a civilization. 3000 BC or so, in the present-day United States, through various methods, farming had developed in the present-day United States, and that's, of course, you need to have that in order to develop civilization. Up to the time of Columbus in 1492, the defining characteristic of the New World, I think, is that it was isolated from Europe and North America. In other words, is very much developing on its own and not necessarily having any contact with outsiders. In just the United States alone, there's probably between 1 million to 1.5 million in the United States, which is far less population density than anywhere else, really. In England, for example, I mean, it's significant more population density. In South America, you have tremendous population density. Just to give you a comparison, okay, 100 million people lived in Europe at the time of Columbus, when Columbus came over. 100 million people lived in, you know, what we call the New World. Now, in the United States, though, our area, and I guess Canada, you could say, those areas were not heavily populated. The heavily populated areas were in South America and in Central America. So, I mean, that tells you. So, isolation being a major feature of the New World, and just in the United States, population density was really, really low. Less than England at that time. We believe now that, you know, again, to give you a comparison, 100 million people in Europe, 100 million people or so in the New World, but seriously, in the United States, hardly anybody. Now, for the Native Americans that were there was a very distinct culture adapted to all the climate and resources of the area, from the Chumash Indians all the way here in California to the Sioux tribe out in the middle of the prairies to the Algonquins. You know, every culture develops a distinct set of rules and everything based on who they are and where they live. And generally, you look at the regions of North America here, and you can see that just different climates, dry, big areas, woodlands. You know, everybody has a distinct characteristic. And if you look at all these tribes here, and don't worry, you don't have to know all this stuff for the quiz here. Just understand that every tribe is different, and every tribe depends on different areas and experiences life differently. And I think that's the big key for chapter 1, is just understanding that diversity, because a lot of the times we don't have a good sense of that diversity with Native American tribes based on Hollywood stereotypes and all kinds of problems in history. Other facts about Native Americans: in the East, that's about 1/3 of the population. In the Great Plains, that's about 1/7, and that makes sense because that's a tremendously large area where there's not a tremendous amount of people. Where we live in Fresno, California, all the way up into the Pacific Northwest, you've got about 1/5 of all Native Americans there. And about 1/4 residing in the Southwest, in areas that are arid, which means dry, difficult to farm, such as the Apaches and Hopis. So this just gives you a little population breakdown about Native Americans. And again, there's the same map that I showed like 3 slides ago, which just to get a little visual of that, you can see there. You know, you can always replay this video too if you get lost. But eastern woodlands and so on and so forth. A little bit about the population density. You can see here, this is a little graph that's related to probably what's in your book there, where you've got the density, surprisingly, is high in California, but not so in other places, which is kind of interesting because that's kind of where America is right now, isn't it? I mean, California is the most populated state, and certainly it's the most populated area back then in terms of population density. And this just gives you the breakdown of the population. Native American tribes, like different for different regions, had different areas that they settled and adapted to. And this is the Sioux tribe here, which would be located in the Great Basin area. I'm sorry, not the Great Basin, the Great Plains, and highly adaptable, making things out of buffalo, as you can see, because that's what they hunted and that's what they used for all kinds of things, food, clothing. You can always go back to this. They used every single part of the buffalo. There's a funny Far Side comic that I should probably try to put up here that, anyway, it's really stupid. I'm going to go past this. I'm sorry. Anyways, California, the Chumash culture, heavily populated, densely populated, hunter-gathering culture. Common patterns of Native American civilization. Hunting and gathering would be the #1 common pattern. Not hunting necessarily big game types of animals, because in the Ice Age those died out. Buffalo would be the primary thing that people would be hunting and gathering, and not every tribe had access to that. So gathering things, acorns, fruit, so on and so forth, berries, that kind of stuff. Agriculture, really big in terms of developing domesticated crops. I think corn would be the big domesticated crop. Altering, adapting to the environment by building permanent structures such as villages. In Middle America, there in Nebraska, in Mississippi, you have mound builders that build giant things where they basically bury people. We've learned a lot of things from that. Different agricultural techniques such as irrigation were developed by Native Americans in order to sustain their populations. Slash and burn techniques to basically get rid of old growth of plants and then to reseed and create new opportunities for growth. One interesting thing here is that the Sioux tribe basically would actually burn a path of grass in the middle of the Great Plains, and then in burning that, what they would do is they would then want the grass to be reseeded, and then the buffalo would follow that, and they would basically lure the buffalo to where they wanted to in order to kill them and use them for whatever they did. So pretty cool. Other commonalities, generally speaking, religion, family, and the idea that land is a resource that needs to be preserved and respected is definitely something that's a common idea. Not that all Native American tribes have common religions, but common religious themes. Family is another common thing as well. No written history, but only oral traditions to make sense of their world. They didn't have historians or scribes necessarily, which isn't entirely true. That may have come later, but generally oral tradition is how traditions are passed down. And we know that Native American tribes worked with each other in terms of trading with each other and linking societies over huge geographic areas. And so Native Americans had plenty of contact with each other. And again, key point, varied cultures. Understand that everybody is diverse and different in Native American lands. In the next lecture, we'll talk about examples of Native American contributions to civilization.